Okay, so thank you guys so much for coming out tonight to meet your city. I guess it's today, it's still the afternoon, right? We don't need to rush a nice Friday. So my name is Katie. I'm the Assistant Communications Librarian here at the library. And we've been putting together Meet Your City. This is our fourth one to form some conversations between community members and political and community leaders. So we will have an opportunity to ask some questions today. We have a mic set up here. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, come up. We're open to it. So let's get started. And I'll also pause for some questions too if we have, if you have them. So I'm very excited to have Mayor Michael Cahill here today with us. So we're going to start off with some easy ones. Who are you? What do you do? And because you're in a library and we have to ask some library-related questions, what's your favorite book?
Thank you, Katie. And thanks for being here. And thanks, BevCam, for filming this. So my name is Mike Cahill. I'm your mayor. I've been elected 3 times to be your mayor, 3 two-year terms. I'm in my 6th year and on the ballot for hope for re-election in a few weeks. Just a little background. I grew up in Centerville, in the Centerville neighborhood of Beverly until I was 11, and then my folks built a house in the Cove, went through the Beverly Public Schools, went off to college in Vermont, and that's probably the only time I've really lived away. Came back to Beverly and taught school for 10 years, and then a passion for environmental policy led me to run for office, and I became our state representative in January of 1993. Served for 10 years in the legislature, and made I don't know if ill-fated is the right word, but made a decision to run for statewide office. I ran for state treasurer in 2002, came in 4th out of 4 candidates, and kind of convinced myself that I didn't want to do that anymore. I worked for the YMCA's for several years after that and ran for mayor. I served a couple of years on the city council and then ran for mayor in 2013. So that kind of career-wise brought me to here. Beyond that, well, you asked what I do. So as mayor, my job is to, quote, run the city, right? I oversee all of our departments. No one person has the expertise to run something as that covers as many subject areas as a city. So we have department heads that have expertise in all the various things we do, and I manage that group of department heads, and we work collectively and collaboratively on trying to deliver great services and protect the city's assets and move the city forward. So that's, in a nutshell, what I do. Favorite books? Well, when I was very young, my favorite book was 10 Apples Up on Top, part of the Dr. Seuss series. I think it was a different author, but it was published under the Dr. Seuss series of books. I love 10 Apples Up on Top because it's the first book I ever read to myself. And then a little bit later, I think I was the summer between 5th and 6th grade, I went to my older brother and said, and he's an avid reader, always has been, and he had a whole library of books at that time. And I said, I need something to read. And he handed me The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, which I read in a span of about 6 hours straight. I didn't eat. I didn't go out. Sorry about that. I'll silence that. I didn't go out, even though it was a beautiful summer day, and my friends came looking to have me play some street football and street hockey and street baseball and all that stuff. I'm going to make sure I silence this. So at any rate, that became my very favorite book, and I've reread it several times. I've always loved reading. I'm always looking for something good to read, when you think about it. So I'll stop and give you back the mic.
Great. It's funny because as you talked about working in the state capitol, when I was in middle school, I think you took us on a tour of I was in the same class as one of your nephews, so you took us on a tour of the State House. I'm sure you don't remember me, but that's fine. So you talked a little bit about how you became involved, but specifically, why was mayor the choice for you in Beverly and making the most impact and becoming involved?
So as I said, I originally got into politics to work on environmental policy in 1992. What I found quickly was I ran for office for certain reasons, found quickly that first, if you get elected, you've got to care about everything. If your constituents care about it, you have to care about it. And then in order to make a positive difference in your community and your state and people's lives, you really need to understand the whole, because the whole set of issues, set of quality of life components, you need to be able to address them all to address any one of them. And I learned that pretty quickly in my time as a legislator. Over time, I found that I was passionate about many things, and particularly passionate about policy issues generally, and how to help positively impact issues from the single individual constituent level through neighborhood, through city, through more regional. It all interests me. And so after I was no longer in the state legislature, I had worked several years for the YMCA's. I was the director of the YMCA State Alliance, which meant simply that I worked for all the Ys in the state on matters of common interest, issues around youth at risk programming, around summer learning programs, health and wellness community-wide, and so forth. But the fact that I've always been interested in things as local as right down to one address, to a neighborhood, to things that matter in our community, how we protect our open spaces, how we try to target growth in a way that brings in resources, financial resources, to deliver services that we all care about in a way that's consistent with the city remaining a place that people want to call home and make a life in. So things like that, really, I got a chance to really focus in on those when I was no longer in office, and that led me to wanting to get back involved by running for local office. I've got to tell you, if you'll have me, I love this job, and I want to keep doing it for as long as people will let me. It's an amazing community. Many of us grew up here and chose to make it our home as adults. People like my parents found Beverly in 1957. My dad was from Dorchester, my mom was from South Peabody, and they needed a home on the train line, and for my dad to get in and out of Boston, and my mom wanted a little bit of help with raising 6 boys. When they bought the house, there was only one. I wasn't here yet, but eventually there were 6 of us. So, lots of reasons to love this community. People who find it choose to make a life here. People who are lucky enough to be born here, and pretty significant percentages either stay or come back.
So I don't know much about being mayor, and so I was curious, what would surprise people the most about your job, and sort of what is your favorite and least favorite part of?
Okay. Oh gosh, I mean, I love people, and I love the opportunity to meet people I don't know, interact with people, kind of roll up our sleeves and try to address concerns and challenges. As a school teacher, I taught for 10 years. I've done a lot of coaching over time, and that's allowed me to continue to feel like an educator. As an educator, I love getting to spend time in our schools and see the great things our kids are doing and the great things that our educators are providing for them, the great opportunities. Sometimes it's hard to get out of my office and get into the schools, or get out of my office and get down Cabot Street. So sometimes it's the volume of meetings and kind of brainstorming necessary and problem solving that has me at my table in my office that can be a frustration. Another thing that I didn't really know was going to be part of the job was playing referee so much. It can get a little frustrating when neighbors who don't get along come to the city and say, solve it. They usually want us to solve it by telling the other one to do what they didn't want to do. That can, but again, I mean, it's real, and it's, I don't begrudge it. Sometimes what 2 neighbors might have a challenge in agreeing on is something that the city can appropriately get involved in, not always. But I absolutely love the getting up and coming to work every day. That's for sure.
Okay, so we did open up some online questions. And I got one that was, what is the city's plan regarding affordable local senior housing in comparison to housing for professionals working in Boston? And I do want to mention too that this is something that's come up at almost every Meet Your City we've had. This has been a very talked about topic. So
good one, Katie. Thanks. So
I gave you your softball.
Yeah, no. We've been grappling with how to provide more housing opportunity. So when you think about affordable housing, you think about subsidized affordable housing for people whose incomes just flat out don't allow them to be able to meet a market rent level of payment. But then you also think about where is the market rate housing at, and is market rate housing really affordable, or is it threatening to not be? So one of the good things that's going on in Beverly is that people want to invest their money in Beverly for all different reasons, right? To all different purposes. One of the challenging things that can happen in Beverly is that people want to invest their money in Beverly, right? But supposing nobody wanted to invest their money in Beverly, then we wouldn't be happy at all. The reason I say that is that, there's been a good amount of investment downtown along the Rantoul Street corridor near the train station. It's something that we, the whole community, chose to welcome. In the master plan that was developed and written and finalized and approved right around between 2000 and 2003, we set a target for transit-oriented development, for more housing to be built near the train station. And one of the recommendations of that master plan was for an overlay district allowing a greater height and density in that corridor because of the perceived and I think real need for housing. So that's been good, and that also has led us to a lot of conversations, particularly recently, around what's the appropriate scale and how do we plan for housing. So I just mentioned that, but stepping back away from that to the question of affordable senior, we have been intentionally, deliberately trying to find ways to support and promote affordable housing in different profiles, because we need it in every profile. And in the last couple of years, hey folks, in the last couple of years, my office and the city council have approved a couple of new housing developments. One has been affordable family housing just up the hill from the high school on the corner of Sawyer and Tozier Road. Deeply affordable family housing, 75 units that will be built by Harbor Light Community Partners, and it's meeting a need both locally and regionally for families who are either homeless or continually at risk of being homeless because of the housing rates. So we've got something very positive moving there. We also approved a proposal by the YMCA right here at their Cabot Street building to take their 45 units of single room occupancy housing and rehab that into studio apartments and add another 24, I believe, another 24 units for adults who are currently homeless and ready for more stable housing, and for adults on the autism spectrum who are ready for more independent but supported housing. So we've got a couple of projects that have been permitted and that are currently putting their funding in place to build. And those are a couple different profiles of housing. So let me get to senior, because that again was your question. We've struggled to figure out how to help facilitate more affordable senior housing being built in the city. And one thing that is on the table right now is what's going to happen with Briscoe. Right? Briscoe was our high school in 1922. Then it became our junior high school, then our middle school. Now it's nothing. I'll say it differently. Now it's a building that doesn't have any occupants at the moment, right? We put together a committee of residents with various types of backgrounds and expertise to look at, this was about 3 years ago now, to look at the future of Briscoe, the future of City Hall, and the future of the police station. And we looked at a number of options, including building a new police station over at the Briscoe campus, moving City Hall into the building, and whatever else might come with it. We looked at tearing down Briscoe and doing all that, police station and City Hall. And we looked at building the new police station over on a 2-acre piece of land the city owns at the front of the Cummings Center and rehabbing the current police station into more city offices. And it turns out that the most expensive option was the one a lot of people liked. I liked it. It's why we looked at it so closely. The most expensive option was to build a police station at Briscoe and rehab it into city offices and move City Hall there. And it was really about twice as expensive. It was in the $65 to $70 million range as opposed to about $35 million range, 35 to 40, to build the police station at our property in front of Cummings and rehab their existing space. So then it was decided, well, that was what needed to happen, and we could no longer use Briscoe. So the school committee and the city council both voted to surplus the building. We made the decision to put an RFP out, a request for proposals, which is we're required to do by law if we dispose of or sell a building. And we spent a lot of time with community conversations around, okay, what should Briscoe be in its next generation? I'm getting to the affordable senior housing piece. And the community decided we really don't want to lose the green space around Briscoe, the field out back and that kind of triangular shaped green park in front. So we want to keep that. We also decided we don't want to lose Briscoe itself, the building. So whoever would buy it needs to redevelop it, not tear it down. And then we worked with a number of interested parties. We kind of threw out there, anybody who's got any interest in this building, come and talk with us, because we're trying to figure out how to best give it its next generation of use. And after a long process of conversations with a whole number of interested parties, we put an RFP out. We got 4 responses, all interesting, all responding in some different fashion to the ways in which it was stated that it could be used. And what's come back are 2 of those proposals have really risen to the top, and they both involve a measure of deeply affordable senior housing. So my hope is that when that process is done, and I wanted it to be done months ago, but it's really a complex effort to lay the proposals side by side and evaluate them out in a way that really makes sense and works. So we've enlisted the help of some state agencies in helping us work through all that process. End process, there should be some affordable senior housing as part of that Briscoe renovation, and that's one. And the other piece to this is we're in the middle of a master planning process, and every meeting we have publicly, every conversation we have publicly, every conversation we have at City Hall with the consultants, with our planning department and others, everything goes to housing, housing, housing. How do we as a community hold ourselves open to additional housing development? Because there's a need, and there's a need at every age level and at every income level. How do we do that in a way that the community can absorb and that doesn't kind of choke us off? So, and senior housing is a big part of that. Now, I'll also say many seniors want nothing more than to live with other seniors. And many seniors never want to live with other seniors. So, right, it's, for some people it's multi-generational settings, and for some people are very interested in being in more of a senior community. So trying to meet those desires, because they're real and they're legitimate, is another part of the whole. I better give you back the microphone, because I think these people probably want to have something to say too.
Kind of branching off of that, you did mention the master plan, and there's been a lot of talk and development over the new master plan that they're building. So I didn't know if you could talk a little more about what's being considered and sort of how people can get involved in the master planning process.
Sure. Thank you. So we decided it was time to write a new master plan because the one we've been using is about 17 years old. So it's time. And a lot of real thoughtful and questioning, and in some cases challenging conversations about development have come up, right? So we kicked off the master planning process back in March. Our goal is to have a finished product by next spring. We've held thus far a lot of, to me, the biggest part of it is the community outreach, conversation, and input, because it's our community and it's our master plan, and it needs to be something that people believe in and point to as legitimate, as I think this past master plan was a really good product of a great process. So we've had 2 citywide workshops, one in the spring, one in the summer. We had an online survey last spring and into the summer that I think about 850 people responded to, and that was great. We've been running neighborhood meetings, and the 7th of 7 neighborhood meetings is next week. It's in Centerville, and I believe it's Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Centerville School. We've done at least one in each ward. We also have online right now a mapping exercise that you can go on the master plan website and take a look at different scenarios and how we might address certain needs. And you can give your thoughts at what's going on in different parts of the community and where might we see, where might it make sense to protect existing uses and protect open space? Where might it make sense for more transformational or infill type of development? Those kind of things. We then will have our third of the 4 big citywide workshops on December 5th, and then the fourth of those will be next year, early next year. We're looking for every single opportunity for discussion, debate, conversation. There's a website called Plan Beverly. I always forget the exact wording, but if you go on our city website, which is www.beverlyma.gov, and I'll ask BevCan to put that up on the screen. Beverly MA for Massachusetts.gov for government. If you go on our city website, on the home page, there's a banner up top to click and get to the master planning website, and I think that's where you look, is right there on top of the page. So really the master plan, we ask and ask and ask again. In a city of 41,000 people are not going to participate in writing a new master plan, but the more people we get from every corner of the city and from every point of view and set of experiences, the better that final product will be.
Thank you. So what are some of the biggest challenges you see facing Beverly as a whole?
Well, we've got a lot of great things going on. You know, I mentioned earlier, it's great that everybody wants to invest in our community. And so that's both an opportunity and a challenge, which we have to be able to work through and think through together to make sure it continues to be an opportunity, right, for good. One of our greatest challenges as a city is just how we finance all the services that we know matter and that we care about. Back in the year 2000, the city of Beverly got about 22% of the money we needed to run our city from the state. You can call it local aid, you can call it state aid. It's money from the state to run our schools. It's money from the state to run the municipal services in our government. And back in 2000, we were getting about 22% of all we needed from the state. After 2 recessions and lots of cuts in state aid that haven't really rebounded, we're only getting 13% of the money needed to run our city from the state. So what it means is we as a city have to find that value each year. Obviously, our taxes go up every year. It's reality. People say to me, when are they going to go down? Well, in the 35 or more than 35 years since Proposition 2.5, they've gone up every year. They do. The cost to deliver the services that we all care. Now, I keep saying that, but we think about it. It's public safety, police and fire. It's emergency 911 response. It's parks and recreation. It's senior. It's veterans. It's the library. It's the health department, the inspectional services. It's all the things. It's the schools. All the things that we care about and that matter and that make Beverly a place people want to be, they cost money. And from year to year, they cost more money than our property tax increases can cover. And as a result, new growth is what we need to find each year. New growth is when somebody invests in a property, the year that the new value is invested, we get that money and it doesn't count under the Proposition 2.5 limits. So we've had a few new buildings built up around Cherry Hill Industrial Park. The Conley brothers built a new headquarters for a company called High Res Bio Solutions. They're a company that develops equipment for medical testing, medical research testing. Great company. They were in Woburn. They were outgrown all the space that was available to them. They needed a new headquarters. Connolly built a building worth $18 million on an empty lot. So the value of that empty lot, when they built that building and it was reassessed by the assessor's department, that new value came on the books and we got that as what we call new growth. That was new money in that year that helps us to deliver those services. The second year that it's on the books, it rolls into that 2.5 limit. It can only go up 2.5% a year. Things like an addition on your home, an in-law apartment, rebuilding a kitchen, those things bring new value, new growth in the year that they are invested in and built. So from the small to the larger, the new growth is something that if we don't get it in a given year, it really chokes our ability to deliver services. That's probably Beverly's greatest challenge, is how to facilitate, how do we prioritize where that growth can happen in terms of new growth, in terms of providing the additional housing we need. That's another challenge, because people feel congested on a lot of our roads, right? So how can we provide new housing in a way that doesn't further, exacerbate that problem? The only other thing I'll say about the housing piece right now is, as we do address housing, some people ask, well, do we really have a problem? Do we really need more? And the affordability question is somewhat a reflection of supply. But also, there's an unmet housing need today, both in Beverly and throughout the region, for the people who are here today, for the jobs that exist today. And then there's a growth in jobs that is coming, and I don't want to overstate this, but I'm a baby boomer. Okay, if you're a baby boomer, you might already be retired, you might not be yet. But eventually, when the whole baby boom generation is in retirement, that's going to be our largest generation of people, right? And when that many people are in retirement at the same time, there are jobs that don't exist today that will then, because more people will need more healthcare services, and more people in retirement with disposable income are going to want to have entertainment options. So this is just a couple thoughts. Entertainment, healthcare, there are jobs that are coming, and there's not the housing to meet the current demand, let alone a future demand. So that's one of our master planning conversations, is where and how do we provide housing opportunities in a way that's sustainable? And to date, one of the best formulas for sustainability of housing is to say it makes most sense to put new housing around our public transportation, where people don't need to use vehicles as often, and where you can walk both to the train if you take it and to some of the services you need. It also speaks to, in the future, our small city having more kind of village centers, more neighborhood shopping options, as opposed to drive-to shopping options where everything's a car trip. And those are planning challenges.
Thank you. At this point, I'd love to open it up if anyone has any questions. You're welcome to. Do you want to come up and speak, or would you? Okay. Okay, I am going to repeat the question. I'll repeat the question for BevCam, but please go ahead and, yeah.
I'm just curious what the status is of the restaurant, maybe housing, I'm not quite clear on it, down on the harbor where I guess it was an old McDonald's years ago. And just curious, because I've heard recently there's a committee together of citizens who are opposing it. They've got themselves a lawyer. I'm just, where are you in that?
You're right.
Do you want to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
You're right. So the question is, where are we with the old McDonald's property? And you're right, there's a group of neighbors who are taking issue with the proposal and have organized themselves to try to stop it. Maybe stop it, maybe change it. I'm trying to sort that one out. So what I understand to be the first McDonald's in New England, when it was built, is no longer, we all know that McDonald's has been gone for 20 years, but it was the McDonald's down at the harbor front, where I remember you could get your Happy Meal and get a change back, right? The burger was 33 cents, the drink was 33 cents, the fries were 33 cents, and you got a penny back. But, for a lot of years, some of us remember, that was a place to go sit out and have a little meal and look at the lobstermen coming in and out, and, look out on the water and enjoy our harbor front. It's been gone. 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, the city applied for a state grant. The state grant was through the Urban Self-Help Grant Fund, and that money was paired together with city money and bought the property. And because of the Urban Self-Help Grant, there's a requirement that there always be public access and enjoyment that results from any use of the property. When the city applied for the grant application talked about some of the things that the city wanted to use the property for. Things like renting marina slips for public use and enjoyment. And one of the critical components of the grant application was that the city wanted to rent the McDonald's property, I should say the building, for a restaurant. And it was all over the application in multiple places. So it always was going to feature a restaurant. And the state agency that awarded the grant awarded it with that understanding and really kind of that stamp of approval. Since that time, the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs in Boston, which is the agency that oversees all this, they signed 3 project agreements with the city, 2 with the former mayor, 1 now with me that we signed about 2 years ago, to articulate just how the city, or should I say how whoever would build a restaurant, right, articulate just how they need to and are allowed to provide the public access and enjoyment while still building a restaurant. So there's a project agreement in place, and the kind of things that are in the proposed restaurant are making sure that there is public accessibility all hours the restaurant is open, through the door, into the foyer, and to use the restrooms. So for every hour the restaurant's open, there'll be public restrooms that'll be the responsibility of the restaurant owner to keep up. One of the requirements is that there be a takeout window and takeout service so you can get food if you walk down to the waterfront seasonally. That'll be like a May through October type of seasonal takeout. And then there'll be a year-round sit-inside restaurant. So, and another piece is that whoever builds the restaurant, and the company that responded is the Mission Restaurant Group. The principal is a gentleman named Marty Bloom. He was a part owner of the Vinny Testa restaurant group. Do you remember the Vinny Testa restaurant? There were several in and around Boston for a while. He currently owns Mission on the Bay in Swampscott and Mission Oak Grill in Newburyport, and a couple of restaurants in the South End in Boston. So it's his group that's proposing to build. They also are being required to provide a public walkway from Water Street across the property to the waterfront. Now, people already can access the waterfront by the Harbor Masters parking lot under the bridge, and they'll be able to continue to access it from Water Street across the parcel. Also, all the parking will be available to the general public and restaurant patrons, not just restaurant patrons. So these are important public benefits to the project. As you said, there's a group that is in opposition, and they're trying to cite some sections in state law and case law, and we don't believe that that's ultimately that ultimately holds sway. We believe that the legal arguments are in favor of the proposal, the process that the city's been undertaking for the last 20-some years. So it's an ongoing conversation. The proposal is currently before the planning board, and the planning board should be voting on it at the November meeting, we expect. They also have a couple of significant permits to get from the state. A MEPA permit, which is an environmental and traffic-related permit, and then a Chapter 91 license, which is all about public access to the waterfront. So the goal is that they work through these local and state permits and are done with them by late next spring, early next summer, and are able to start building to open the restaurant in 2021.
Did you have a question there? Yeah, sure. If you'd like to speak into this mic here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Paul Willenbrock, and I have a lot of positive things to say about Beverly. I have 3 grandchildren in the school systems, and the schools have always been wonderful. They continue to be. I love the senior center. I love the library. I do have one question, however, and that is, I'm not from Beverly. I've already been here 45 years. I don't know if I said that. I own a home on Prospect Hill. And all the roads, almost, are being redone, like Baker Avenue and Odell. But there's a little street that I live on. It's called Clifford Avenue. It's a little dead-end street. Then there's another little street that goes down from it called McKinley. And those are the 2 streets, my information is, that are not being redone. And I would love to get Clifford Avenue redone. I don't ever going to move, and that's my question. What can I do? What can I do to get that done?
Thank you, Paul. So we have about 150 miles of roadway in Beverly. we have probably, and this is a number a little bit out of the air, so please don't put too much stock in it, but I'm going to inflate it a bit. If we were to pave every road and fix every sidewalk in the city in the next year, the price tag is probably, everything that needs doing, because we've done a bunch in the last several years, the price tag is probably $45–50 million. Now, again, that's a little bit out of the air, but in terms of scale, it's a pretty significant number that we'd actually have to spend. We're spending about $2.9 million this year on roads and sidewalks. Now, we get about $1 million from the state each year. I say from the state, look, we pay gas taxes. I do, you do. Some of that money, that state and federal tax, gas tax money, some of it comes back to us each year. We get about $1 million through what's called Chapter 90. We've been able, through our city budget each year since I've been mayor, to put a good chunk of money in for city money. This year it's about 1.9. Now there were a number of years where the city wasn't really able to put any money in. And in all fairness to Mayor Scanlon, who I think did a lot of great things, he was mayor through 2 pretty bad recessions, right? And he built a number of schools and he fixed a lot of drainage problems, and there's a lot of positive that's gone on in the city in terms of infrastructure investment. We've been trying to put a lot of attention to the roads. Sometimes we look at the end of the year and say, well, what did our 2.5 million buy us? Or what did our 2.9 million buy us? And we look and say, oh, it bought us 6 miles. Oh my gosh. You know, there's a lot to this. So it's always a challenge. Every couple of years, we have a company come in and reevaluate our road surfaces and their conditions. They did that this summer. It's called the Pavement Index. And we're close to getting a report from them, which will be put up on the website. So you'll be able to see the updated condition of Clifford Ave. And what it grades, they grade from 0 to 100. And so you'll be able to compare it against others. I don't want to say other streets' names out loud, but there are a number of neighborhoods that are in regular contact with us about the condition of their streets, and there are a number who aren't, who we're paying attention to as well. Centerville and Beverly Farms got sewer in 1975, 1976. So a lot of the paving surfaces in Centerville and Beverly Farms are about 45 years old. So that's the last time they were paved. There are other neighborhoods, because we know after World War II and right on through the 70s, a lot of development, then some kind of tolling of development with all the inflation that went off in the second half of the 70s and a bunch of development in the 80s. We have a fair amount of older road surface still. It's the reality. And so there's obviously much more need than capability any given year. What you're seeing in your neighborhood, Paul, and I'm sensitive to it because you and your neighbors have been asking for 3+ years now for Clifford and McKinley, I'm very sensitive to it. What is happening right now is National Grid came in and put new gas main and services in at a bunch of the streets in your neighborhood, but not your street. And when they do that, we give them options. They can pay more to do a 6-foot wide grind and inlay to the trenches they dig, and that's meant to last 10 years. Or they can do a cheaper, less lasting 3-foot wide grind and inlay. And it's all negotiated, and when we allow that, it's because they're going to pay us additional money, and we're going to do some paving work. And so in those several streets around you on Prospect Hill, we negotiated with them a year ago to not spend the money on the fix, but we would rather grind and overlay those streets. And that's what you're seeing happen. So I've gone back to our team and we're looking at Clifford and McKinley because you had your gas work done some years ago. And we're looking to see whether there's a capability of addressing those in the coming year. Not this fall. But so not a promise, we're still looking, but let's stay in touch. And we know that, and we know the need is so great in many other places around town, we have to balance that all as we look at it. Mm-hmm.
When Beverly Farms lets us use West Beach, that do all their work. And if you could bring back Alcons for me, I would love that.
Okay.
But I appreciate that, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Me and my neighbors with Clifford Avenue.
Yeah. No,
all the time with it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a great need. That's why we keep trying to push as much money into roads and sidewalks as we can each year. We also know that when there's a down economy, that's a line item that gets cut. And it gets cut because you can take that money and stave off layoffs to departments that are delivering services. So while the economy's good, we're trying to make hay with doing as much as we can. Other questions, folks? Sure.
One question is on Rantoul Street, the ability of the city to encourage more services. You mentioned that yourself, that the value of transportation-related housing, to use to commute, but also you want, I know, a neighborhood that people can avail themselves on foot rather than needing, now they can commute, but they still have to drive somewhere to shop. So is there more, the zoning, I think, that requires in the new apartment buildings going up some commercial space in there, I think is great. And is there anything more that the city can do? Like get a market, encourage a market, which would really anchor, the feeling of a neighborhood community on Rantoul Street.
Right. Well, those are great questions. The thread of your question is, what can we do to encourage the type of commercial businesses to come in downtown that will allow for truly a more walkable kind of village center or neighborhood center, so fewer car trips for some of the basic necessities people have. So we've done a couple of things already. One was several years ago, we went to the state to get a handful of greengrocer beer, wine, package store licenses. Not your traditional all alcohol package store, but have you been on Charles Street? What's the name of that little shop on Charles Street around the corner from the Starbucks in Boston? DeLuca's. It's got a deli counter, it's got fresh produce, it's got prepared meals, and it's got beer and wine. And so we're looking and saying, that's got to come around the depot. The whole thought was, and this is the National Main Street's mantra, rooftops before retail. You need more people living in downtown before you can get more retail that is sustainable. So that's been part of that thought, is more people living downtown and it'll come. So we put those licenses in place for one. The zoning, we rewrote the ground floor or commercial requirements for zoning on our main streets a couple of years ago, and that was an acknowledgement that Cabot and Rantoul Street are each about a mile long. And if we require a storefront on every square foot of ground floor all along those two streets, we can't really sustain that, right? And so we'd end up seeing some empty storefronts. So we tried to target the greater demand for commercial retail on the first floor, closer to the depot on Rantoul, and a little less as you move out. Similarly on Cabot and kind of the historic retail heart of Cabot, more and a little less as you move out. So that's in place. In terms of other zoning changes that can be helpful, that's a part of the master plan conversation, and we're reaching out and asking it and trying to get best practices everywhere we can, both from outside the city and from within the people of Beverly's own frames of reference and ideas. There is, so supposed to be opening later this year. I think their initial target for opening was this past summer, and they missed it, but they're working towards an opening. The first floor of the new apartment building right in front of the MBTA garage is going to be a kind of greengrocer, beer and wine, prepared meals, as well as a coffee shop and a full-service lunch and dinner restaurant. Have you been to Italy? There are Italy's in cities all over the world. It's kind of a mini 5,200 square foot Italy, right? And the couple who are opening it, Frank McClellan, I'm sorry I don't know his wife's first name, they're the former owners of L'Espalier in Boston. Frank McClellan has been a top 25 chef nationally for decades. He's well-renowned. They live on Cape Ann, and they were looking to do something a little closer to home. So we're really excited for that to open, and it will become, for a lot of people in that neighborhood, in that transit-oriented area, a real walk-to opportunity, and that's a great one.
Yeah. I mean, there really are benefits that also go towards the environment, climate change, the encouraging, making it possible to live a life, with, let's say, one instead of two cars. That, there are different levels that it's good for Beverly, it's good for the world.
Right. So your comment, it kind of following up on climate impact, greenhouse gas impacts, and our carbon footprint. When you ask me about challenges and opportunities, that's, I should have led with that because that's the biggest one we've got. What we've found with the transit-oriented development, the mixed-use buildings that have been built along Rantoul Street in the last decade, we've studied it twice, 4 years apart. And what we're finding is, for each unit of housing, there's about 0.8 vehicles. So less than one vehicle, fewer than one vehicle per housing unit. We're requiring that the people who build these buildings put one unit of housing per, one parking space per unit of housing on the property. And they're not using all of them, which is great. And we also know that the cars that do come with those units don't take as many car trips as somebody who lives in the outlying neighborhoods, right? They still take some, there's still, but fewer. I've been serving for the last year and a few months on a committee that the State Secretary of Transportation put together called the Rail Visioning Committee. It's a group of about 18 of us from around the state who are looking at what should be the future of our train system. There was a similar study about what should be the future of the subways, and the governor and his team are trying to take all this information in. The reality is that our train system hasn't been modernized since the mid-20th century. And what we need is to build and have in place a 21st century transit system by the middle of the 21st century. That's a realistic target. Because for Greater Boston to continue to be one of these great places in the world, for businesses to locate, for people to make a home, raise a family, make a life, site a business, this is a great place to be. In order for it to keep on being that well into the next century, to be economically competitive, we need a transit system that works. In order for us to meet our greenhouse gas requirements, not just targets, but requirements, the reality is we need to do our part, every city and town, every state, every country, in order that the earth is hospitable to our kids and our grandkids going forward. So the climate action needs of public transit, the way for Beverly as one small city to be livable and sustainable well into the future is for these public transportation options to be improved. So there's a lot there, for sure. And our how we design buildings, how we move around, where we grow and where we don't grow. It all plays into that same set of concerns, and we need to do it right. We need to do it well.
Are there any other questions? Sure.
I was just at the Tiny House Festival this past weekend and quite enamored with it. I live in a fairly large house, but I always am curious, are towns making strides towards, allowing tiny houses? What's the status of tiny houses?
We, a few years ago, because Salem and Peabody had already done it, and we were working with them on some joint efforts towards providing more affordable housing.
Question, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, what are we doing around different housing types, and specifically tiny homes, which a lot of people are promoting as a way to house people in a much more energy efficient way, right? And taking up less land per unit. And so a few years ago, we were working with Peabody and Salem on affordable housing needs, and they had already done a housing needs analysis and developed housing production plans, each of them. So we realized we better do so. Our housing needs analysis showed real consistent findings with other communities in the whole region that the need continues to be there. And so we followed that with the housing production plan, which has, I think, 14 or 15 recommendations, which is on our website and on our master plan website to take a look at. I'm trying to remember if there's a tiny home recommendation. I think there may not be, but that could be more reflective of the fact that the work was completed 3 years ago. And this is more of, it's a growing conversation, shrinking homes. So we can and should be having that conversation. And I'm happy to incorporate it in our master planning process. I think it hasn't so much come up at the workshops, and maybe that's an opportunity for you as well, both online and in person. There are, as I said, there are a lot of recommendations around how we might provide more housing opportunities. And a couple of the ways, I mean, transit-oriented development is one that I continue to believe in. We have other train stations in other neighborhoods, and we might look and see whether there's capacity and opportunity to do more in those neighborhoods. I would say that the scale that we have seen transit-oriented development on Rantoul Street, with an intentional allowance for more height by a special permit process, that may not be an outcome of this current master plan. We may see a bit of a kind of scaling back on what we do, and certainly the other neighborhoods are smaller in what's available around those train stations. But I think there is opportunity to say every unit of housing that's built close to a train provides more opportunity to commute by walking and public transportation than by driving. Certainly the neighborhoods that grew up around our train station over time were largely inspired by people who wanted to live there and walk to the train and back. So there's that. And then there's also something that has become hot in the news over in Salem. Accessory dwelling units are thoughts that you could take an existing single family or two family or three family, and you could find a way to add a unit within. Now, we currently have in Beverly what we call an in-law ordinance. If you are a relative of somebody who owns a single family, then they can get a special permit to build an in-law apartment within the house for you, right? We don't currently allow that for people who are not related. That's a conversation that we're having during the master planning process, and it's one that doesn't come without emotion, for sure, because it holds the potential of changing the dynamic in certain neighborhoods. It also holds out the potential to build more housing further away from the center of town or the train station neighborhoods. That can be both a good and a challenging thing. Right now, if you live further away from downtown or from transit, you got to drive. What's Beverly going to look like in 10 years and 20 years? Are we going to hit a point, and I think we will, where we're going to start seeing an all-day bus service coming from downtown Danvers through Ryleside and in and out of downtown Beverly? But is that 2 years away or 15 or 20 years away? We may eventually see a bus running from the Wenham line in Centerville in and out of downtown all day. But again, that's not today or tomorrow. Right now, there's too much of a... Right now, everybody uses vehicle trips for all of that. But I think, much like you see in a lot of European communities, we need a more vibrant transit option moving forward. So can our outlying neighborhoods support more housing than they currently have? Well, maybe, if we're not permanently talking about one person in a private vehicle for every trip that's needed, right? But those are the kind of challenges around planning that we're in the middle of debating and discussing and trying to figure out. So that's I don't think I could say enough times, please plug into the master planning process and come share your thoughts and help us find our way on it.
Oh,
To follow up on the bus, what's preventing development of small buses patrolling or going through routes on the outline, Centerville, where I live, and other
Yeah. Why aren't we doing more busing? Why aren't we providing more bus routes and trying to offer that service?
Could a private company, does it have to be the city?
Does it have to be the city? No. Could it be a private company? Yes. It's cost, right? If somebody tries a bus route and you don't get enough people taking it, somebody's losing money. Now, we just launched back in the early summer a last mile commuter shuttle to take people from the Beverly Depot to their place of employment, to their offices. The goal is to get people out of their cars and onto the train when they commute. So it's a 2-year pilot. We got a state grant to help make it happen. We went to several employers who have stops on the shuttle loop at their places of business. And the town of Danvers and the city of Beverly, we made a commitment to help fund the program as well. So it's a 2-year pilot to try to have it take hold. And the challenge is finding enough people who are willing to do that, to ride that loop. Because you're talking about people who currently live close enough to a train station that they could choose to take the train to Beverly and then to their place of business, but are currently driving instead, right? And there are a lot of reasons why people do that. There are a lot of reasons to get them out of their cars. I mean, if you're in your car, you got your own personal space. You can listen to a podcast or sports talk radio or your favorite music. You can talk on the phone and conduct business in your own little space. But you're stuck in traffic. Oh, and then on the other side, you have the flexibility if you need to get home quickly that you can just leave work if it's an emergency situation. So you give up a little bit of that to take the train. If the train's on time, like it should be, and if the shuttle's waiting there like it's supposed to be, you can rely on that, you can have more predictability in when you leave home and get to work. You can also take a nap on the train or do a little work on the train, right? So there are a lot of, you have trade-offs and you can look at cost benefits. If you can walk from home to the train, then it's fairly easy to walk out the door, get on the train, step onto the shuttle that's waiting for you and take it to the front door of your business. If you've got to drive to the train, it's an extra mode of transit, right? So how do we get these things to take root? We've been working to try to fill that shuttle bus, and it's not full yet. There are people taking it, but we know that with an annual budget of about $160,000 to run it, we need to get a lot of people bought into and taking it on a regular basis during the pilot period. We have a 2-year pilot. Then we're going to need to make a decision. The stakeholders that are funding it, are they going to keep funding it? Is there a point where you can charge some money to the riders? Currently, the employers are subsidizing it so their employees can ride it. So it's really about everything costs money and what's cost effective and what's the best investment to ease traffic congestion, to provide a better option, to lower greenhouse gas emissions. It's all those things together, right? But yeah, this shuttle pilot is a great opportunity, and we know that we have a 2-year period to prove it. If it works and enough people will ride it, then we can look at another one. Because this one is going from the train station through Cummings Center up to cell signaling over to the Cherry Hill Industrial buildings. If that proves itself out, maybe we can then do another one that gets over to Sawyer and Tozer Road, the hospital, Dunham Road, because there's enough opportunity there with employment and business too. But this first one has to work. And there's a level of participation that would signify success, right? We're not there yet.
I just wanted to make a comment. One of the really good things that happens in Beverly, and that was last night with the Halloween on Cabot Street. That's a real important thing for us to pull people together and make people really happy. It's really great to have people.
He was just mentioning how wonderful downtown Trick or Treat was last night, which was a lot of fun. So thank you. Yeah.
I'll just say to that, Paul, thank you to Beverly Main Streets, who runs it, who sponsors it, puts it together each year. Thanks to our Public Services Department, our Police Department, our Fire Department, who put together a plan each year for public safety around the event. If you remember several years ago, it used to be an event where people were driving up and down Cabot Street in the middle of it, and we realized that wasn't safe. So we decided 5 years ago to block the road and make it an event where kids and parents and grandparents and older siblings and aunts and uncles can, oh gosh. When the weather's nice, I think we probably had 2,500 kids. It's a guess, but we kept running out of candy and running down to the dollar store to get more. I know the dentists are excited, but it's a wonderful community event, and there are a lot of people who make it happen and who deserve our thanks for sure. Yeah.
I just want to say the Rotary on Essex Street works great. Oh, it does. Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, so we built a roundabout in Centerville a few years ago. So since I lived in Centerville till I was 11, and have always had a love for Centerville, I've personally seen the need for something different at the bottom of that hill where that stop sign off the highway was, and we figured out it was a roundabout, and it is working really well. We're very grateful for that. I think that the design, there was enough room. Sometimes with a roundabout, if you don't have the room, you can't build it. But there was enough room there. We are doing a big project to improve 3 intersections. The Henry's intersection, the intersection right at the driveway of the Beverly Golf and Tennis Club where Balt Street meets McKay, and the intersection at the foot of the Veterans Memorial, also known as Beverly Salem Bridge. We've been fighting hard to get state funding for that, and it's finally coming. And the goal is to start those projects next summer. We looked at roundabouts in all of those locations, and none of them had the space that we needed. Excuse me. I'm a real fan of roundabouts. I see how they work. Yeah, and we'll put them where we can put them. Unfortunately, like at Henry's, if we did a roundabout at Henry's, we would have taken the whole bank parking lot and half of Henry's parking lot. You just can't do that. But the one in Centerville is working really well. We're all really appreciative of that.
Great. So we're going to wrap it up with just one more question, unless we're going to. Okay. So I guess we'll end on something positive and exciting. So what are you most excited about for the future of Beverly? I know there's a lot, but if there's something that's on the top of the list, we'd love to hear it.
Well, first, thanks again to you and our whole team at the library who do amazing work. And open your doors to so many different meetings, events, programs. And we have a lot of fun here. You know, as far as what I'm excited about, you know, as I said earlier, the fact that people want to be in Beverly, people want to open a business here, they want to invest money here, they want to live here, and you know, we've all known all along how great Beverly is, and you know, the more people find out about it. You know, our challenge and our opportunity lies there, a big one. We haven't talked about our schools, but our school district, there's a lot of great stuff that goes on in the Beverly schools, and there's a lot to celebrate with our kids, with our teachers and other professional staff, with our families, and it's important to note that I for one, and I know my colleagues on school committee and our educational leaders in the district, nobody's satisfied. Everybody's pushing, you know, for more and better at all times. And my personal goal is for greatness consistently throughout every classroom, all the time, throughout all grade levels, that's sustainable throughout the years, that we can fund in good times and bad, so that the educational opportunities and outcomes for our kids are everything they can be. And there's a whole lot to kind of focus in on there. And it probably isn't fair to try to do it when we've run out of time. But it's probably a very worthwhile conversation for another round. But really and truly, the curriculum development that I've seen in my 6 years as mayor, consistently improving the instruction is consistently improving, the leadership at the building level right up through the district level. The professional development, it's not haphazard, it's not, you know, here or there, it's with a thought and with a plan. And we're a school district that a lot of other school districts are looking to for innovation. And they're seeing the things we've been doing over the last 10, 15 years, and they're taking from us. And that's exciting. And again, we can't be satisfied, but there's a lot of great that's happening, and there's a lot more that we want to push towards. And I'll close with all the work we're doing around sustainability, because it's important at every level. Sustainability, if you define it, it's what are we seeing in terms of impacts on our coastline from climate change, from storms, from tidal surges. How do we improve our defenses? How do we plan for that? How do we deal with it? And then it's how do we do our part as one small city in addressing our own greenhouse gas emissions, and how do we plan and take shape a community that performs well on all those fronts well into the future. And it's something we work at every day. So thanks so much for spending a little time together.
Thank you all for coming out.